This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
So there's a very dark side to the self-help community, industry, worldly view, and you yourself might be participating in it. Guys, welcome to the Bird Brain Podcast, where the goal is to rise above it all, stay elevated, create that infinity, up your you. I'm your host, Isaiah, and I had already recorded an episode for this week, and you can find that one on YouTube, actually. It's a video, but this one is a separate topic that I wanted to discuss, and it's the dark side of self-help. Are you actually healing or just distracting yourself? Okay, the self-help industry is worth billions. But it's important to ask yourself how much of it is actually helping. How much are you actually helping yourself? Okay, and there's a fine line between personal growth and using self-help as a crutch. Some people consume endless books, courses, and podcasts, but they never take real action. Okay. And I want you to, take an honest, sober look at yourself without judgment, but just, information. Okay. This is just going to be a very objective point of view from someone who is actually a professional mental health coach, life coach. Okay. Myself, someone who does the work, someone who posts content, I receive content, books, all of it. Like, there is a very interesting dynamic that I have noticed with professionals, but also just people. And it's not always self-help. It's not always self-help. In actuality, a lot of times it can be self-centeredness, selfishness, okay? A different way of performing or getting needs met without necessarily having to acknowledge or be aware of our impact and our behaviors, okay? And then one of my, I think one of my biggest axes to grind is the concept of boundaries, right? This whole idea, first of all, of self-help can be a very addicting concept, right? Because there is, how do I explain it? You have all the niceties, right? You have all the kind words, you have all the things that are said, and they sound nice, okay? Or you hear a podcast or you read a book, and in that moment it's comforting, right? Someone tells you, hey, screw everybody, you matter too, so on and so forth. And it's like, oh yeah, I do matter. Dope. And depending on who you are and how your personality works, or even what you are looking to listen to, you take that and run with it, and then it starts to become weaponized. Personally, one of my biggest things I advocate for is mental health. I am a big advocate for mental health for a lot of reasons. As a Black man, okay, as someone, again, who went to school to study this very thing and got my degrees in what I practice now, and someone who has experienced the many variations of the relationships that people talk about, whether it's narcissism, okay, that's a big one. Someone with ADHD, depression, introversion, extroversion, like you name it, I've likely experienced it. And what I've seen a lot, and also what I've experienced is people's eagerness to um, just be lazy about the dynamics of relationship as a whole and finding shortcuts or microwaved phrases or behaviors to make themselves feel better, right? The consumption of self-help and personal development information is at an all-time high. And one of the things I like to be aware of is that everybody is listening to the same information. And what I mean by that is everybody is not looking to necessarily do better. There are some people who are looking for better ways to make themselves feel better about their behavior. Okay, when it comes to neurodivergence, right? Like that's become a booming topic, and now everybody is neurodivergent. And these characteristics that are associated with mistreatment or mishandling of other people is now being associated with being neurodivergent. For me personally, having friends, having relatives, having people who don't operate like that, it really upsets me. The reason why is because this is how certain behaviors and certain conditions that actually deserve attention get kicked under the rug, or they themselves become a stereotype. Okay, and stereotypes exist. They've been around for quite some time, and we can see how it affects or impacts a group of people because one person did one thing or one person was perceived as a certain way, and now that becomes the collective idea of who they are, right? Someone says, well, yeah, I don't communicate well, or I'm dismissive, or I discard my relationships or whatever because I have ADHD. That's just how I am. And it's like, no, that's not what ADHD is. Or someone says, well, yeah, due to my depression, this is why I'm so shitty when it comes to my relationships and how I treat people. And I'm like, you know what? Nope, that's not it. The DSM, or even when you go to get screened for any kind of disorder, there are checks and balances that need to be in place to define whether or not you are able to be diagnosed. Just like if you have a cold or a flu, right? Just because a person sneezes doesn't mean that they have a cold. There are other symptoms that need to be put in place for us to actually be like, hey, you're sick. You have a cold. Because sometimes it could just be allergies. You get me? So when it comes to this whole space of like mental health, ADHD, depression, even introversion. Introversion is not a personality disorder. It's a personality trait. Okay. A lot of people try to use introversion as a reason for them being so negligent and careless in their relationships, or just how they are with people. Very reckless. I myself, as an introvert, a very high ranking introvert, most people wouldn't know because of what's associated with introversion to begin with, right? You are incapable of having healthy relationships. You're shy. You are socially inept. Okay. Your communication skills are poor. What else? You're cold. You're distant. Basically, you are incapable of being a human that functions well in society, right? That's often the misconception of what it means to be introverted. However, like I said, I built my own practice, right? I've written 4 books at this point. I My work is to work with people and help them improve their lives and their relationships. And I am introverted. Okay. So when I see people who are using that as a ways to justify poor behavior, and just a willingness to be reckless with people, to be emotionally immature, to be very dismissive, to mishandle people. Here's the deal. No one likes being treated poorly. I haven't met a person yet who actually enjoys being treated poorly. I've yet to meet a person. In all the years of being on this earth, I have yet to meet a person who actually enjoys being treated poorly. However, our ability to do it to other people seems to be very easy. Okay. And then when it comes to this whole self-help, world and the words that people are now learning, or yeah, just the words, the terminologies, okay, because people are not doing more extensive research, or people are not actually educating themselves. They're just looking for the things that make them feel comfortable. All right. And that's what self help has done for a lot of people. Okay. And instead of it being self help, it's actually a self crutch. Okay. Especially this concept of boundaries. Okay. One of the things I work with clients is how do you establish a healthy boundary? What does it look like? And one of the things I tell them, boundaries are terms and conditions. Okay. It's a contract. If then this. Okay. And it's not a demand of another person. Okay. It's not manipulation of another person. It's just simply saying that, hey, this is what's needed for us to exist in a healthy relationship, which means that I still have respect for you in the whole process. It is not one sided. Okay, that's what a boundary typically looks like. It's looking for ways to keep this other person in your life. So saying to an individual, hey, look, I notice that every time we have a conversation, you try to deflect, or there doesn't seem to be any ownership, or we keep going back to the same thing, or, you yell at me, or you become critical of who I am as a person. If that continues to happen, we are not going to have a discussion. And in consequence, we're not going to have a relationship. That's a boundary. It's not even a threat. It's simply saying that, hey, being that I don't feel like I'm supported or safe in this dynamic with you, if that continues to be the pattern, I'm going to step away, because what's going to happen is I'm going to respond to you in kind, and or I will start to resent you, right? Boundaries are meant to keep both people healthy. And sometimes a boundary does look like not having a person in your life because they themselves are not willing to change. Okay? But sometimes people use that word boundary as a way to avoid their own responsibility in relationship. For example, I know text messaging and communication, it's very subjective in terms of what's okay and what's not. For example, when we talk about friendship especially, someone says, well, I have a busy life, or we're all adults. I got things to do. I don't need to respond back to you right away, right? We don't need to be on our phones 24 hours. I don't know a person who isn't on their phone 24 hours, even I myself, being that, again, I run a company and I am writing books, recording podcasts, posting content on social media. I still have my phone. Am I working on my phone? Likely. Yeah, but I still have my phone. Okay? I still have my phone. And I know how much work I do in a day. Okay? So when these other people are like, well, yeah, I don't have to respond to you, I don't have to talk to you, it's like, okay, so what are you actually looking to say? Well, that's my boundary. All right, well, are you communicating that clearly to the other person, and are you actually creating a terms and conditions, or are you just saying, I don't have to deal with you unless I want to? That's not a boundary. Okay. And then when a person asks you for clarity, or asks for some kind of repair or solution, there's an attack, right? I don't have to talk to you. You're needy. You're not my partner. Okay. That's my boundary. That's not a boundary. Okay. That's selfishness, but also that's emotional immaturity. And I'll stand on that. Okay. When people use that as a ways to kind of get out of jail free card, it starts to make more trouble for the collective, because now everybody starts walking around with this attitude. However, everybody's complaining about how hard it is to date, how hard it is to find friendship. Okay. How isolating life is and how lonely it is. Yeah. Because everybody's walking around with this idea that they don't owe anybody anything, but we expect so much from other people. Okay. And we do hide behind this thing of like, I'm protecting my peace. No, you're actually avoiding your responsibility. There's a big difference between protecting your peace and actually avoiding holding yourself accountable for how you may be treating others. And that's where this whole self-help dynamic starts to get a little bit murky, because a lot of people are not getting better. A lot of people are not putting in the actual work to improve. And how do I know that? I used to think about that because people would be like, well, how do you know somebody isn't trying? How do you know somebody isn't working on getting better? Well, pay attention.
Lowe's knows that free is just better. That's why MyLowe's Rewards is free to join. As a member, you earn points towards MyLowe's money on eligible purchases, get exclusive free gifts, and earn free shipping at Silver Key status, all on top of weekly member-only deals. Don't wait. Join MyLowe's Rewards for free today and start saving more. Lowe's, we help, you save. Loyalty program subject to terms and conditions. Details at lowes.com/terms. Subject to change.
Pay attention to the pattern of their relationships, okay? And I always say pay attention to how often somebody is willing to be inconvenienced. Because this personal development stuff, this vulnerability stuff, okay, this having adult conversation stuff, this making effort for your relationships is very inconvenient. Very inconvenient. Consistency is inconvenient. Okay? I can't tell you how many times I went to sit down and either went to work on something, or even some days I was too tired to go to the gym. I was like, man, do I actually want to go today? Maybe I can skip a day. I don't even feel like getting out of bed. And I got up. That was an inconvenience for me in a lot of ways. Having a hard conversation is an inconvenience. Why? Because it puts you in a situation where you may be on the receptive end of somebody else's disapproval of you. A lot of times people are not practicing self-help because depending on how much you are actually improving yourself will show in how you treat other people. It's full stop. You know, a lot of these people who talk about how high of standards that they have don't have actual high standards, okay? They have high demands for other people because they themselves don't even meet their own standards. And that's why they are in isolation. That's why they don't really have relationships. I'm not saying standards will prevent you from, well, I'm not saying standards won't condense your relationship circle. However, standards will not isolate you. A lot of the people who talk about how high of standards they have don't really have them. Because your relationships would reflect, okay, you would find people that you're actually looking to do a relationship with, and you guys will function properly. Okay. And then there's an idea of, well, I've been through so much, so I'm not looking to give everybody my everything. And it's like, okay, well, what do you expect from people? Well, yeah, this person should come correct. They should have this. They should have this. They should be able to communicate. They should be emotionally mature. They should be going to therapy. They should be doing all these things. And you ask that person, well, how often do you participate in it? Well, I don't have time. I work too much. Or, well, I've been through too much, so I'm still working through a lot, so I'm not ready to open up to people. Right? There is most certainly a double standard that the self-help talk or the self-help world has really allowed people to play with and weaponize. Okay? A lot of this self-improvement stuff is just simply a disguise for avoidance. All right? And even though other people are not always monitoring who we are 24/7, we can be honest with ourselves, okay? Our pattern behavior will show up in what we produce and what we provide. Every time. There is no hiding from who you actually are and how you function in this world. Period. And to be a decent human most certainly does not take perfection. You know, there are a lot of people out there who think that they're actually vulnerable with others, and truth be told, they're not. They're not. Vulnerability is a very different dynamic. And you don't have to be vulnerable with everybody, but it still requires you to be present in your connections. There was one thing, I've never done this, but I've thought about it so much. Online, whenever I typically talk about, friendship and finding good people and just being a good person, you'll have someone in the comments who goes, well, where are all the good people? You know, it seems like I never have them. And then you just find everybody who's commented a different version of the same thing. And one time I finally just said it. I was like, hey, well, look in the comment section, because all of you guys seem to be having the same issue, but none of you guys have made it a point to reach out to each other. Why is that? If that's truly what you were seeking, is right there, why are you looking past it? And somebody may be like, well, I don't know these people with social media. Okay, but you felt comfortable enough to put the SOS out there on social media. So which one is it? Sometimes we don't want to get better, right? Because to get better would require a certain level of responsibility that we are not really willing to take up. That's why we exist in these relationships that are typically emotionally unavailable, because it allows us to be unavailable also. If we are constantly having to chase or critique or condemn or criticize another person's behavior, then we can take the smoke off of ourselves. Right? And I've had this thing happen with previous clients from way back. And I notice when they start to avoid me is when they're not ready to change, because we finally address a certain issue or a certain concern and they opt out. A lot of times you have to ask yourself, am I looking for growth or am I looking for comfort? Because it's very easy. Truth be told, guys, I don't even listen to a lot of podcasts. I think either I don't have time or I just don't consume much, right? I read books and I do make it a point to try to apply the principles, but I spend a lot of time in life just trying to figure out how to improve. I'm having very real conversations with the people in my life. I'm going through my personal experiences. I am going to therapy, right? It's like I'm doing all this other work and I'm applying it. And my relationships have most certainly shown that. Okay? Because some have changed in a big way, for better or for worse. And it's not this thing of like, I'm better or whatever, but I'm working harder. And that in turn makes me better. It's really crucial to ask yourself and be honest with yourself. How much am I actually participating in my personal development, or am I just looking for ways to buy time? It's like the person who wants to appear that they're working so hard. In actuality, they're not. There is a very dark component to the self-help space. And the most important part of that is comfort. How are people looking to be comfortable with their own behavior? How are we weaponizing actual mental disorders? Okay, how are we misconstruing personality traits to justify poor character, right? Character flaws. All right, introversion is not a character flaw. The things that people do and they define as introversion is a character flaw. You know, and it's not to say that every introvert is an intentional person. However, a person who's careless and reckless and discarding of other people does not make them an introvert at all. They're very separate. You know, not wanting to communicate because you're drained or having an off day, that's fine. You know, even recently for myself, I've been going through it and I hadn't necessarily had the energy to participate in my relationships to the full capacity. And what was great was that I was able to communicate to those people. They knew, all right? And I was still treating them well. They never felt like I was being disrespectful to them. That never came up. And we were still able to maintain healthy relationships. The reason why is because I still recognize, despite what I'm going through, that doesn't mean I put somebody else through something and I use it as a crutch later. There's no such thing as a pass for treating people poorly when you go around saying how poorly you've been treated. If you know how it feels to be treated well or mistreated, then you have some idea of how to treat other people, period. But a lot of times people are kind of lazy in that space. And then they default to the whole self-help thing. I'm not saying self-help is comfortable. I'm not saying it's pretty. But it does have purpose behind it. It does have pattern behavior. And it does have proof. Okay? So I really want you to think about that and really just pay attention to what you use, okay, throughout your day. And I want you to see, how is that helping me? How is it helping my relationships? Or is it taking me away from everything that I need? Self-help also doesn't require isolation. I know when we talk about standards, I know when we talk about having boundaries and non-negotiables and all that, people say, well, yeah, I'm just going to be alone. That's not how it works. Personally, I can tell you from a professional standpoint and also personal, that's not how it works. And from an introverted perspective, that's not how it works. Okay? Sometimes we desire a certain level of consistency and dynamics from people that we ourselves haven't even provided yet to ourselves. All right? So I just want you to think about that and really put that into your back pocket. It's something I've really been thinking about in so many ways. And I think it's just necessary to constantly have these conversations, because sometimes people are getting by. And like with any good thing, there's always going to be a collective that uses it and abuses it. And I think self-help is a space for that. Spirituality is a space for that, right? To deny responsibility and make yourself seem like you are better, okay? But you're just trying to be above the human impact that you have when it comes to other people. And that's not it. That's not what we're here to do. Okay. Your relationships will reflect not only how you treat yourself, but also how you are willing to treat others in your value system when it comes to them. All right. So that's all I got. Happy March. Happy March. There's a lot to be grateful for. There's a lot changing. The time, the season. Things are starting to bloom, and I hope things are blooming for you in your heart space and your head space, and just in life, okay? But take it one day at a time, all right? And in the meantime, take care of yourselves. Please take care of each other. Take flight.